Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to an Unplanned Rescue Michigan Monday Night Live stream. We don't do too many of these. We just had one last night, but we had kind of a downer stream last night for the most part. A lot of bad news in the world, but there was one story that was looking pretty good for Trump, and that was this. Well, looking good for Trump, I'd say, but a lot of drama going on in our courts over this one particular. I mean, there's a lot of drama in the courts with Trump, but one particular case, which is the case of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia. I think I got that right.
Yeah, Kilmar is a tough name to go with, but Kilmar is good. That's a good one. So let's call it that.
He is the one who the media have been telling us for weeks and weeks now was wrongfully deported to El Salvador, a pure innocent family man. Happened to be in the country illegally, adjudicated as a gang member, but whatever. Anyway, this big mistake got sent to El Salvador. Terrible, barbaric, draconian Trump administration, and the courts have BTFO'd Trump. So we heard the Supreme Court ordered his return, and but the story was not quite as it appeared. So we delved into that a bit last night, but this is a very fast-moving story, and today there has been some incredible legal filings to go over. Plus, if you haven't already seen it, we're going to watch the amazing news conference that Trump just did, which clearly is addressing this very subject. Like, that's exactly why this was here, to really just destroy, first off, the mainstream media's narrative, but also this is the case that the administration seems to have decided is the time to absolutely throw down on. And what happened today was absolutely explosive. Joining me tonight is attorney Matt Wilk to kind of take us through all this. So, Matt, if you would like, I mean, I talked about this on my show last night, but if you want to set the table, because, some people watching probably have already heard a little bit about this, but why don't you give us kind of the backstory on this? If you'd like, I can do it also, but either which way, we'll kind of give people the rundown of what's been going on here.
No sweat. So something people don't realize is that when you are filing a request for asylum or for immigration, you do that in a specialized court called an immigration court. And it's run under the executive branch of the government. Okay. It's not under Article 3. That's judges that are appointed judicially, because the people who are decided about are not yet citizens and ostensibly not yet they have the right to be in America. So that's done in sort of a separate court. And in 2019, this particular individual, and I'm pulling up the thing so I can do it exactly right. He went before an immigration judge, and DHS had said, this is Department of Homeland Security, had said, no, we're not going to allow you to stay. You are a member of MS-13.
To be clear, he got lots of due process on this. Like, they had hearings, there were witnesses, they had things like, the things that normally go into police work and criminal cases, like witnesses saying that he was a member of the gang, and forensic work, like seeing his tattoos, and documentation, like people identifying the rank he was in the gang. He was found to be adjudicated to be a member of this MS-13 foreign drug smuggling, fentanyl dealing, murderous gang.
And by murders, you got to mean that it is some of the most horrendous and horrible things you've ever seen. It's like from a movie, except for it's not a movie, and it's happening in the United States. And these guys they're bad people. So the immigration judge said, nope, not entitled to it. This guy, particularly, they noted that this particular person did not present any evidence to rebut this assertion.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. You got all this note. You got all this. You're in front of a judge. Nope, can't come up with anything to rebut this assertion. Probably because it's true. You never know, but it's true. There's another.
Yeah, it'd be weird if there was like no evidence and just somehow they just randomly picked this guy up off the street. He must be an MS-13. It was like he was almost like rounded up and a whole bunch of gang members were busted all at once and committing probably some gang-related activity, perhaps. Like,
right.
I don't know.
Right. And the difference between sort of the way things are done now and the way things were done then is they said, okay. And so it goes to a Board of Immigration Appeals. That's the next level. They agree. And the judge says, you're ordered removed.
So he got even more due process. He got an appeal.
He got an appeal.
He must have had too. He must have had a fantastic legal team. It's amazing how these hardworking illegal aliens have this fine legal representation.
Weird.
Almost
Huh?
like they have their own secondary source of income. They're not
Weird. I don't know. It's almost like an organization or some group of people is out funding it. It's so odd.
Yeah.
So they went on and for some reason they did not remove him. They said whatever, we stayed pending or whatever.
Well, he was deported. He just didn't actually do it.
He didn't actually do it. And that's part of the biggest problem with the system. The biggest problem with the system is that a judge, an immigration appeals judge, can say, get out, but they don't have a huge staff. And most of the time in the last 20 years, they haven't had any focus to actually take that guy and get him out, right? Now, so they did this, and I want to explain one more thing, just so people understand about asylum, okay? So asylum is something that was started in the 1950s as the Iron Curtain existed, okay? And there was a treaty, and they realized that all these countries that needed a rule about when and how asylum would be done, okay? So you had, issues all over the planet, people moving around and claiming that they were asylum as a result of war, and some were due it and some weren't, okay? And so this was a treaty, and in America, a treaty has to go to Congress and be passed by a supermajority of Congress and signed by the president, and that was done. But one of the parts of this treaty says that if you are going to get asylum, you must seek asylum in what's called the first safe country. Okay. Yeah. And that means with respect to the whatever you're claiming, if that no longer exists in the second country you go to, you must seek asylum there. So
if you're in El Salvador and you go through Guatemala, and then you go through Mexico, and then you come to the United States, because you don't want to live in Mexico, you want to live in the United States.
Right.
The policy is, well, actually, you're supposed to have stopped in the first safe country you can get to. You don't just get to come to the United States because you'd like to live here.
Especially considering the complaint is in this country, in this particular, most of these guys, they get these form documents and they make these form complaints, and they say, well, the police are ineffective to stop gang violence, and therefore the police are facilitating it, and therefore I don't feel, because it has to be something with respect to the government. It can't be I have somebody chasing me. It can't be the gang is going after me. That's not a reason for asylum.
He did actually claim that, but he didn't get asylum.
Right, he didn't get asylum, right? So he did.
So he is, request denied.
He's a member on the list. You're a member of MS-13, unrefuted. Yep. And then now you got a new sheriff in town, right? And the sheriff in town says, "Okay, get out." Yep. And they put him on a plane. The new president of El Salvador, who is, I've never been to El Salvador. He says apparently doing a bang up job.
He's apparently the most popular world leader in the world. Like, of all the countries in the world, he's more popular than any of them.
Yeah, I mean, just understand that this violence is no longer allowed. We are not basically turning El Salvador into Singapore overnight. Right? Just boom, we're doing it. Yeah. And so, but he also has a big prison, and he's volunteered at a very low cost to house some people who we're putting out of this country. Between the time where we want them out and their country has agreed to take them back. Okay. Now that really for Venezuela, that's the big one, because MS-13 was founded in Venezuela. The Venezuelans are like, we don't want them back. Of course you don't want them back. They're murderers. They're violent criminals. You don't want them back. Right. And you're not gonna do anything we say.
But this guy's he's from El Salvador.
This particular guy's different, right? So they said, okay, El Salvador, can you take these people? He said, sure. So now the government did admit that on a list, he was.
Now, I think there's also one wrinkle in this, which is that when you are ordered deported, the government doesn't have to, but as a courtesy, they can. If you say, please don't send me back to El Salvador, they say, okay, well, you can deport somewhere else, and they give you a deportation order. They can do that as a matter of discretion, which apparently they did in 2019.
Right.
The thing is, then in 2025. President Trump declared MS-13 is now a terrorist organization. And now being adjudicated a member of a terrorist organization, you lose that courtesy. Right. And this apparently is the step that was the administrative error that led them to say, oh, we should have deported him back to El Salvador because we had yet to file the paperwork saying, hey, by the way, you're a member of a terrorist organization. Now you don't get that courtesy anymore. We're going to send you wherever we want to.
Right. Or at any point, the last 6 years, I wouldn't have an RBI, but at any point, they could have taken him to Gitmo. That was allowed. You're allowed to go to Gitmo, but you're only not allowed to go because of this allegation that he was subject to gang violence. Now, remember, that's under the previous president who had a problem with violence. This was a 19. The guy's not in a 19. And they put him on a plane. And they put him on a plane to El Salvador. And while the plane is in the air, the judge says, I demand you, not just with respect to this guy, with respect to the other 25 people that are on various cases. And I found the case, it's all consolidated. You turn the plane around. Of course, the judge says, to which the government says,
was this that same case?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, and the government says, no, plane's outside of America. Sorry. We don't have you just don't have the authority to do that. You don't have the authority to tell us how to manage things and whatever. Plane landed, guy got off, plane turns around, comes back. Okay, thank you for the fuel. We appreciate it. And then we get to the point now he's going back and forth with this judge this is in
Paula Zenas. This is a federal court in, I believe, the Greenbelt district in Maryland.
It is in Maryland. That is
yes.
Cool. Why Maryland, you say? Great question, I say.
Yeah.
What, did he live in Maryland? No. Is the government in Maryland? Well, they're close, but they're not in Maryland. So what do we do here? We forum shopped.
Yeah.
We forum shopped.
Yeah. So somehow the case manages to land in her courtroom, where she starts issuing these crazy orders demanding the immediate return of this guy, this MS-13 terrorist. And the government just says, well, that's actually something you can't order us to do because it's foreign policy now. So, and we talked about this last night. So where we left off, there was this Supreme Court decision because the judge says you need to facilitate and effectuate are the terms, his return to the United States. And so the Supreme Court came out with this order, which was just the other day, and the media was lying about left and right and saying the Supreme Court has said that Trump has to return. Trump has lost this one 9-0. He needs to return this MS-13 terrorist back to the United States. They're very happy about this in mass media, of course. So he is in CCOT. And again, we read this last night, so I don't go into this too much. But basically, they say that the government acknowledged he was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal and that the removal was therefore illegal. This is either completely untrue, which is what I contended last night. Apparently, some people are now saying that actually there was some lawyer who was a holdover from the Biden administration, the DOD, that conceded this and has been, if not fired, certainly contradicted by everything else that the DOJ has been filing since then. So no, it was maybe administratively an error, but no big deal, not illegal, certainly not a crime. But anyway, the Supreme Court actually put this in writing, and then they quote here, this is the Supreme Court saying that the judge gave this order to facilitate and effectuate the return. And the Supreme Court is very politely saying you can't do that. So why don't you just clarify what you mean by facilitate? How about we put it that way? We won't just say you're a rogue judge and trying to issue something you can't do. So let's just do this. We're just going to require clarification on remand. The order properly requires them to facilitate his release from custody and to ensure your case is handled as it would have been had not been a president to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate is unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The court needs to clarify that directive. And so, and the three Democrats spewed a bunch of complete nonsense and lies in their dissent, saying falsely this was a warrantless arrest, and that they have no basis in law for his removal to El Salvador, which we just went over. So they're just completely lying, as unfortunately Democrats, even in robes, are apt to do. By the way, hey everybody, hey Mark, hey Russ, thanks guys for joining us. Mark says thank you, Matt, for helping me a lot when you were a school board member. When Mark was a school board member, so there you go.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark. Anyway. So we're talking about this last night, and there has been some action in this case, culminating with an incredible press conference today. But first, when the district judge got this order from the Supreme Court, you would think she would show a little humility, a little deference to the Supreme Court, but no. She says, I win.
Since the court was very specific,
yes,
and it said, hey, judge, the scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed. You might have exceeded your authority there.
Yeah, please clarify. With due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch and the conduct of foreign affairs that you have no authority over. And for its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can. Notice how lenient that is. Share what it can. concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. So the judge goes, I win. I demand that you bring him back immediately. And of course, the Department of Justice is like, that's not what this order says. No. So they have this hearing on this, and in like record speed. This is like happening like multiple hearings a day are happening on this stuff. They put out an order at like 6 o'clock at night, demanding they haul him in at 9:30 a.m. What have you done to effectuate my order to bring this guy back right away? And so they have this hearing, a show cause hearing why you shouldn't be held in contempt of her order of this tyrant. And then the judge orders daily updates from the Department of Justice, demanding to know what they have done, where the guy is, what they've done to bring him home, which is not what the Supreme Court ordered in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if you look carefully, the order properly requires the government to facilitate the release from custody, not the return to the United States. It doesn't say anything about that. To facilitate the release from custody. Well, what can they do to facilitate the release from custody? He's in a foreign prison. It's a foreign jurisdiction.
And that's an important distinction. An important distinction is, for the longest time, what was happening is people were coming to America to have their claims for asylum, et cetera, adjudicated, right? That's not required. You could have this guy, if he wants, sue the United States government and say, hey, you shouldn't have kicked me out. And while that's going on, he's sitting in his home country of El Salvador. And that's what he really doesn't want. It's not that he doesn't want to have this fight. He knows he's going to lose this fight. What he doesn't want to do is sit in El Salvador while he has this fight.
Yeah.
And if you read down to the last sentence, for its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. Not share everything you know, not demand that it's do X or Y or Z. What are the prospects of future steps? And that's coming from the highest court in the land. Highest court in the land is saying, this is what you should be asking for, district court judge. Instead, you get something else.
So a few updates. First thing is these daily reports that the judge has ordered. The first one he came in, the judge said, there's 3 things I want you to tell me every single day. I want to know where he is now. I want to know what you are doing to bring him home. And there's the third thing, which is like in part the same essential thing. What have you done to do as I've demanded you do to bring him home right away? And so this is the declaration of Michael G. Kozak. And this was, do I have a date on this? It might be on the bottom.
Is that
2 days ago? This was Saturday.
Saturday, okay.
So Michael G. Kozak, this is very short, says, I'm a senior bureau official at the State Department. I'm a member of this senior executive service responsible for coordination of the blah, blah, blah. I'm aware of this lawsuit. I provide this declaration based on my personal knowledge, reasonable inquiry, and information obtained from other State Department employees, i.e. don't go after me for perjury. It's my understanding, based on official reporting from our embassy in San Salvador, that Abrego Garcia is currently being held in the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador. He is alive and secure. He is detained pursuant to the sovereign domestic authority of El Salvador. That's it. He ignored the second question and third question the judge didn't. I heard this actually was submitted 5 minutes late, too, just to piss off the judge even more. So that's all you get. Yeah, he's alive and breathing. He's in El Salvador. He's still in the terrorism center. And that's all they say.
And particularly, he is detained pursuant to the domestic sovereign authority of El Salvador.
Yeah. So then yesterday comes the second daily update. And this one is from the Assistant Director for the Removal Division within the Department of Homeland Security, ICE. And this one is going to be saying more. Well, first they're going to put some things on the record just to spell it out for when this goes back to the Supreme Court very, very, very soon. Here's what they say. In this capacity, I'm responsible for leading the division. I coordinate with the blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. I am aware of this court's preliminary injunction issued. The government sought to stay pending appeal from the Fourth Circuit on the same day, blah, the things that have already happened. So now he starts to lay out the factual basis for the deportation. And here we go. During proceedings in 2019, an immigration judge upheld DHS's decision not to grant bond, finding that DHS's determination that he was a member of MS-13 was trustworthy and supported by other evidence, and noted that Abrego Garcia failed to present evidence to rebut that assertion. The Board of Immigration Appeals upheld the finding when Abrego Garcia appealed. On March 15, 2025, Abrego Garcia, a native and citizen of El Salvador, was removed to El Salvador pursuant to Title 8 of the U.S. Code. Although he has an order of removal issued by an immigration judge, I understand that he should not have been eligible for withholding of removal because of his membership in MS-13, which is now a designated foreign terrorist organization. Oh, like we said last night.
Right.
And like we just said just now. I reviewed the declaration of Michael Kozak, and we just read, which was filed yesterday. It's my understanding that defendants have no updates for the court beyond what was provided yesterday. That's his daily report. Same as yesterday. Nothing changed.
I was gonna say, Your Honor.
And that's it. That's it. So now you know the judge's blood's really boiling. But we've got two more documents, and then we have the news conference from today.
Well, I think the last document comes after.
Yeah, it comes after. Okay, we'll do it in order. We'll do the so the next thing is now the Department of Justice coming back at this judge, and also, of course, this guy's lawyers have filed demands for all kinds of things, not just his coming back, but they want discovery, they want all this kind of stuff. So they're going to answer all of that. This is also quite short. It's maybe 6 pages, and then the Trump news conference, which is amazing, and then the final document that just got filed moments ago, which is also hilarious and much shorter even still. It's a 1-pager. But here we go. Oh, by the way, I always forget to mention this, but let me not forget this time. Folks, please hit that like button if you enjoy what we're doing here, because it does help our channels and all that good stuff. So anyway, this was filed, I think yesterday. Let's see.
Yes, Sunday. That's correct.
I've got a date on this someplace, I think. Well, anyway, here we go. On Friday, April 11th, the court found that defendants failed to comply with the court's order entered hours earlier. The defendants of the United States, the Trump administration. The court is the rogue activist judge. Failed to comply with the rogue activist judge's order enter hours earlier, directing defendants, the United States government, to submit sworn testimony revealing sensitive information and previewing non-final, unvetted diplomatic strategies. Because, again, she gave them no time whatsoever to respond to anything. The court then ordered that beginning April 12th and continuing each day thereafter until further order of the court, defendants shall file daily on or before 5 p.m. a declaration made by an individual with personal knowledge. Here's the 3 things. The current physical location and custodial status of Abrego Garcia, what steps, if any, defendants have taken to facilitate his immediate return to the United States, what additional steps defendants will take, and when to facilitate his return. So what have you done and what are you going to do? The answers being nada and nothing. In addition, the court set a deadline for plaintiffs to seek any additional relief. That's the MS-13 terrorist lawyers, to seek any additional relief by April 12th. In response, they moved for 3 categories of relief. An order superintending and micromanaging defendants' foreign relations with the independent sovereign nation of El Salvador. Oh, that sounds reasonable. An order allowing expedited discovery and converting Tuesday's hearing into an evidentiary hearing. And an order to show causes for why defendants should not be held in contempt. The court should deny plaintiffs' request for further relief. The relief sought by the terrorists is inconsistent with the Supreme Court's instruction requiring this court to respect the president's Article 2 authority to manage foreign policy. Just spelling what the Supreme Court was very, very polite about. Now they got to be a little bit more direct here. Should reject plaintiffs' request for further intrusive supervision of the executive's facilitation process beyond the daily status reports already ordered. Footnote. Defendants object to the requirement of daily status reports and reserve the right to challenge that requirement further. But first, for the rest of this, plaintiffs requested additional relief is not consistent with either the Supreme Court's order or the well-established meaning of facilitating returns in immigration law. We've talked about this, and harbors fundamental constitutional infirmities. This court should deny the motion and adhere to the best reading of its amended order. On April 12, 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States granted in part the government's motion to stay this court's original preliminary injunction order. The Supreme Court explained that on remand, any new order must clarify the scope of the term, quote unquote, effectuate in a manner that, quote, did not exceed the district, I didn't put the quotes in the right place, exceed the district court's authority, close quote, order at 2. The court instructed that any directive must give due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. Gee, what does that mean? We just talked about that. And it made clear that any directive should concern Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and ensure his case is handled as would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. In response, the court amended its prior order that evening to, quote, direct that defendants take all available steps to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia to the United States as soon as possible. In other words, not what the Supreme Court limited them to doing. The Supreme Court said,
and after the order. After the order is
after this, she is defying the Supreme Court of the United States.
No question. Absolutely no doubt. The Supreme Court, they don't use that language loosely. It's short, it's written, they parse every word, and they said, hey, look, as polite as we possibly can, facilitate is okay. Can you help make something happen?
Facilitate release, not effectuate return.
Effectuate means make it happen.
Yeah.
And they said you can't do that. You can't mandate, demand that they make it happen. What does the judge say? Take all available steps to return him to the United States, which is not what it said.
Which they never said.
Ways.
Yeah. So, as we just said, here we go. Defendants understand facilitate to mean what the term has long meant in the immigration context, namely actions allowing an alien to enter the United States. Taking all available steps to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia is thus best read as taking all available steps to remove any domestic obstacles that would otherwise impede the alien's ability to return here. Indeed, no other reading of facilitate is tenable or constitutional here. This reading follows directly from the Supreme Court's order, holding any directive must give due regard for the executive branch's exclusive authorities over foreign affairs. It tracks long-standing executive practice, quoting from Sotomayor, describing the ICE policy directive as the well-established policy of the United States. That's funny. And it comports with how the federal courts have understood the outer bounds of their own power. See citations. On the flip side, reading facilitate as requiring something more than domestic measures would not only flout the Supreme Court's order, but also violate the separation of powers. The federal courts have no authority to direct the executive branch to conduct foreign relations in a particular way or engage with a foreign sovereign in a given manner. That is the, quote, exclusive power of the president as the sole organ of the federal government in the field of international relations.
And that is what the Supreme Court has already said for 90 years. That is not their lane. And think about it, cases in 1936, the Supreme Court was very comfortable widening the lane of their own authority. And this, they said, that we're not going to tell you in the run-up to World War II how you handle international relations. We cannot do that.
Yep. Such power is conclusive and preclusive and beyond the reach of the federal court's equitable authority. Not to mention this is a trial court, not a immigration court even, but
no, right. You know. And again, we seek this relief that is outside of the scope of what these courts can do. And it doesn't stop them. They don't pause for a second. They demand, I'm judge in whatever area, and I'm going to demand that the United States government do all these things that I tell it to do. And it only happens when Republicans are in office, because the Democratic president does those things already, and Republicans don't go in and say, this is what you must do. Now, we've gone in and say, you can't do that. That's different. But this is like, here's what you must do as the government. You're going to have to do something to bring this person back to the United States, this El Salvadorian citizen who happens to be a member of MS-13. You're going to have to bring him back to the United States. You know why? Because I say so.
So here's how they put it. The plaintiff's additional relief runs headlong through this constitutional limit. They ask this court to order defendants to, 1, make demands of the El Salvadoran government, 2, dispatch personnel onto the soil of an independent sovereign nation, and 3, send an aircraft into the airspace of a sovereign foreign nation to extract a citizen of that nation from its own custody. All these requested orders involve interactions with a foreign sovereign, potential violations of that sovereignty. But as explained, a federal court cannot compel the executive branch to engage in any mandated act of diplomacy or incursion upon the sovereignty of another nation. Plaintiffs invite this court to exceed its own authority in the precise sort of way the Supreme Court just 2 days ago told them they can't do. This court should decline the invitation. No additional relief is warranted this time. Consistent with the court's latest order, defendants are providing daily status reports that share what they can as the government determines an appropriate course of action. Although defendants were not prepared to share this information with the court within hours of its order, that's a little snipe at them for demand. I want your answer by morning. Defendants responded to the first of the court's questions yesterday evening. It confirmed that Mr. Abrego Garcia is alive and secure in the custody of El Salvador at CCOT. It is now public information that the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, is currently in the United States. Will be meeting with President Donald Trump on Monday. Politics chat. Trump to meet. Okay, this is a quote from a news article. Defendants will continue to share updates as appropriate. Any further intrusion into the sensitive process, and so this is part of this reason why they had the summit today, to make absolutely clear this is foreign policy you can't infringe upon. And any directive from the court to take actions against the nation of El Salvador would be inconsistent with the care counseled by the Supreme Court. As discussed above, the court should decline plaintiff's request that the requested steps both exceed defendant's authority and are inconsistent with the Supreme Court's directions. The court could not and should not enter an order directing any of the steps, and for the same reasons above, the same things again, and blah, 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 blah. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean,
this guy's got an email address. I don't know if he's got a Venmo, but send him some beer money.
The concept is pretty clear. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is when you are in the conduct of foreign affairs, you are in a bubble that the judges cannot pierce. Okay. Let's say, for example, Trump does what he's been talking about, and he's going to have some discussions with Iran. Okay. And let's say it goes whatever way, and the Iranian president's going to come to the United States. Can a judge in California rule that the Iranian judge should be arrested and then demand that the president do that? No, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is he's conducting foreign affairs. And if he's not the sole voice, and you can go back to the Federalist Papers and the founding of this country, everybody knew that in the conduct of foreign affairs, you had to have a sole voice, not him and John Kerry, right? And three other guys and Nancy Pelosi running over to the Iranians saying it's okay. You have one voice, and that one voice is President Trump, and what he had to say was quite amazing.
So here comes the beatdown, folks. And this is awesome. Like they pulled out all the stops here. They put the whole team on this because they know this is really important. Like they know that entire hoax was constructed for the purpose of trying to impeach Trump 2 years from now if they can. And the Trump team is on this. And you are about to see a complete judicial beatdown. This is incredible. We may pause as we need to comment on this as we go, but here it is. Let me know if you guys can hear.
President Bukele, the best guarantee that this time you won't terminate the temporary protected status?
I have a great relationship with this man. I have the best relationship with him. We've known each other. I've known him since he was a very young man, as I said, very, very young. And I was impressed. I said, look at this guy is, in fact, you sort of look like a teenager.
I think this is the same room where Gretchen Whitmer was recently photographed.
You look like a teenager. I said,
I don't know if that's good or bad, Mr. President.
He grew up well in the last 5 years.
Do you support the extension for nationals of El Salvador under
I
temporary
support
protected
him.
status?
Do you plan to ask
Let's
here
hear
we
the
go.
question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President. Do you plan to ask President
Low
Bukele
rating.
to help return the man who your administration says was
Which
mistakenly
one is that?
deported? The man who was
is
mistakenly
Caitlin Collins,
deported
I
to El
think.
Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs. If they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
By the way, they don't have to provide a plane. We just went over this. You don't have to don't provide a plane. You know how expensive charter flights are? Save the plane. Leave him there. Let him come back on his own.
They don't
He's
have
a resourceful guy.
they don't have to do a darn thing. But let's hear more.
Here we
So
go.
will you return him,
And
President
you
Bukele?
are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Pam.
Usted estaría dispuesto
Stephen
a-
Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. as 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme.
I think you pulled some punches on that judge. He should have said a lot more about her. This rogue, tyrannical district court inferior judge has no authority to do this. You know, I mean, go through everything we just did. But anyway, I'll let him continue.
Court. And the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the president could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world. And I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to
But the
ask for
Supreme
anything
Court's
to get
asking
it back?
to,
And
Is that-
what was the
Is
ruling
that-
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor?
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it per the court can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what do you-
Presidente
what is
Bukele?
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
So we
How
said
can I smuggle, how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not gonna do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
You can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not
So
releasing.
the media seized upon this. He says, I don't have the power to smuggle him back to the United States. Which obviously, I mean, he's joking around. Like, yeah, he's like, I'm not going to send a terrorist back to the United States. It's not that they're like, oh, he said he's like implying he couldn't do it. Of course he could do it. It's like, well, first of all, no, I can't because as they just said, they're not going to accept him. And secondly, morally, I can't do this because you're asking me to deport a known terrorist to the United States. No, is what he's telling him. I mean, this is the way the media spins this is like they're playing this shell game where they're trying to pass the buck to one another as if they just could work out somehow how they're going to bring this guy back in. And Stephen Miller just said, no, he's not. There's no scenario where this ends with us bringing a foreign terrorist back to the United States, period. But so now they're trying to lay the blame on this guy. So anyway, here you
We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? And that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our
I mean, there's
So
a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President, no, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme
It's so simple, even Marco Rubio gets it.
The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, the president.
Where the media never
you said
quotes
that
what he
the
says about
Supreme Court said
CNN.
someone needed to be returned, that you would abide
Weird.
by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please go ahead.
President Trump.
That was a brilliant answer, but we should point out exactly what they're talking about there, because the other day they asked Trump about this, and he's not been briefed on this fully, and he's just like, I'm going to comply with the Supreme Court, because at the time the media's narrative was going full swing, saying that Trump got BTFO'd by the Supreme Court. What do you say about that, Mr. Trump? He's like, I'll pay the Supreme Court. Of course, that's just because that's, as it turns out, the Supreme Court order was proper, and the media was just lying about it. So now they're trying to pin it back on him again, see if maybe they can get some more mileage out of this. And Trump's just like, buzz off.
Yeah. I mean, the Supreme Court, for its failings in the last however many, months, most of them have a pretty clear idea of one thing, and that is you can't step over those boundaries. When they decided Trump via the U.S. before the election, and Trump won hands down, it was very clear that a lot of them had a problem with a judge stepping over the boundaries between the judicial and the executive. And then, Trump wins election, gets inaugurated, starts doing executive orders, and it starts all over again. Where you issue this executive order, I'm going to issue a injunction stopping it. And they bounce up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, stop it. And they keep sending it back and back and back. What people need to understand is that the cases you see where they win, it's not the only cases they file. They'll file 20 of these in different courts hoping to get the right judge. Yeah. And all they got to do is win one. If they lose 19 times and they win one, they still get the injunction they want.
Or they'll win a TRO, a temporary restraining order, to win for a few days, and then the appeals court will reverse them, and the media won't report on that at all. Like, the whole world will report whenever they get a short-term victory, but never how the case finally ends.
Correct, 100% correct.
But the other thing, too, the real problem with all of these injunctions is that Congress has not done anything about any of these judges yet. They have not. They've filed motions to impeach them, which they know are going to go nowhere. But if they wanted to, first off, the Constitution does not say impeachment is the only remedy for removal, nor does the state's Constitution, by the way, folks. The legislature has the power to remove all lower court, anyone below this level of the Supreme Court. The courts are a creation of Congress. And remember, the Democrats did not need a 2/3 majority or 60 votes for Harry Reid to end the filibuster for judicial nominees. And we know the Democrats have said they will end the filibuster the day they take back the U.S. Senate. So Republicans have chosen to allow the Democrats to block everything they want to do, even knowing that the moment the Democrats have majority, they will run right over them, and are allowing the Democrats to block any action that the Congress might take to rein in these judges.
Yeah, although to be fair, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin both disagreed. They were both
and they're both gone.
Yeah, they're both gone.
Because the Democrats screened them out and made sure every future Democrat candidate for the U.S. Senate will not get any support from them unless they are absolutely committed to ending the filibuster.
It's a litmus test, no question about it. No question.
The filibuster will be dead the moment that the Democrats take back power, and Republicans will not preempt them. And in doing so, Dems have said about the filibuster. Have said what? That they will end the filibuster? They have said they will end the filibuster. Yeah, the only reason they didn't last time they were in power was because, as Matt just said, because they didn't have the votes, because of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. And now they're gone. And the next time the Democrats have majority, they will take it.
Although I will say this, I actually, as a lawyer, I kind of like this, because what it's doing is it's in a court that's, between 5'4" and 6'3", depending on how you look at it. They're setting these precedents. And what they're doing is they're taking a guy like John Roberts, who can rule on the wrong side of things, and they're making him pound these things into the ground, and they're getting more and more solid. And every time that, if you saw the reversal of the injunction about firing people, and what they said, it was summarily dismissed. And they said, look, you don't have standing, Mr. Random person, that the government is shrinking. The standing is a big issue, right? Do you have the right to object? And what the court said is, no, someone claiming that their public services will be limited because people in this agency have been fired, they don't have standing. And that's a little bit outside, but it's deferential to the executive branch. And I'll tell you this is what I think is going to happen. Doge is going to continue for 4 solid years, and they are going to gut everything, because that is like peeling an onion. There's just layer after layer after layer after layer. And if they've established by that point, there's a case called Humphrey's Executor, which was about the creation of a
real quick, sorry to interrupt. Patty says this, Alessa Slotkin looking saying the filibuster. I'm sure. I hope that's being sarcastic, Patty. Maybe I couldn't read that. But just so you know, here's Slotkin on the record. We're going to end the filibuster. They've all said this. They've all said this. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. They all have. They're the 100% they have. She's right there. So the Humphrey's Executor said, hey, the Congress can set up these quasi-judicial, quasi-legislative agencies. And it's gone around for a while. Again, that was in the 30s. It's been precedent, and it's been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And Trump ain't chipping away anymore. He went and fired people, and he said, I don't need a reason. I don't have to give a justification. I don't have to give a cause. You can't have an agency outside of the executive and outside of the legislative. That is a violation of the Constitution. You cannot create a 4th branch of government. And once that genie is out of the bottle, wow, there's something going on, because they're going to go through and start hatcheting all of these things.
Well, I hope Trump does as much destruction to the deep state as he possibly can, including the judicial priesthood as well. My concern is when Democrats, if they ever get back into power, they will put Paula Zenas on the Supreme Court. They will put Judge Boasberg on the Supreme Court.
That's right.
And they will immediately reverse everything.
Yeah.
The Democrats have absolutely no limits. The fact that the Republicans today are setting precedents will not matter to them. They'll say, you know what? Republicans reverse on Roe v. Wade. We'll reverse on anything in the world we want to.
Yeah, it makes those senatorial races very, very important, because that map looks pretty good for Republicans for the time being. And I'm telling you, so does Sonia Sotomayor. She's not in great health. It would just blow their minds if they lost another one, or Clarence Thomas finally decides to hang it up and they find a great replacement and they solidify this thing, because that's going to be a haven for people. Loper Bright is a big deal. The major questions doctrine is a big deal. They're going to be dragged. They're going into court, and they're going to get some results. So, at least I hope so.
Yeah. All right. Let's let the president continue here.
How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible.
Great answer.
The president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex.
We got lots of room.
Can you build some more of them, please?
Build some more.
As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it, because nobody can understand. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country.
This is all doing more to curb the flow of illegal immigration than everything else the administration is doing.
That's right.
Millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark. And one of the doctors said, "Sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark." I hope you're happy with that. Although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive, but I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I noticed there's no questions, so probably you are. But
Victory laps.
They said to me, "Sir, would you like to take a cognitive test?" I said, "Did Biden take one?" "No." "Did anybody take one?" "No, not too many people took them." I said, what about Obama? Did he take one?" "No, he didn't take one either." I said, "Let me be the only one to take one." But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because they're not too tough for me to take. But we had a great physical exam, so I knew you were going to ask that. And the doctors, who are total professionals, Walter Reed Medical Center, they're great people. And I visited a soldier that was badly wounded. incredible soldier, lost his leg, and spent a lot of time with him. I mean, great with his mother, and it was really a very great thing. They do a phenomenal job. I just want to say, Walter Reed, I was there for 5-6 hours. You were there with me. But I took a full physical, and it came out perfecto, so that's good. That means you got me for a little longer.
Would you be willing to pay for those facilities to be opened if new ones were going to be built?
I'd do something, we'd help them out, yeah. We help them. They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam, I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have.
Well, I say that, Matt. I heard an attorney make the contention that, if you were to put an American citizen in CCOT in El Salvador, that's not a deportation. That's just putting them into a prison. A deportation is to say you are expelled from our country and you can't come back. But to have an American prisoner on foreign soil is still they're just housing them. That's just
it's an interesting question because it's not too different than Gitmo. Gitmo was an American base in a foreign country. You'd have to own it. It'd have to be yours or have to control it somehow. But could the American government create a federal prison in, someplace like that? Probably. They could create a federal prison in Nome, Alaska, I'm sure, too.
That might cut down on the violent crime.
Yeah, I mean,
it's weird how the violent crimes have been getting so bad lately as the laws have gotten softer and weaker and the criminals keep getting let out. I don't know.
It's weird. And it's weird that it happens in those places. There seems to be like a correlation between weak enforcement of laws and more crime. It's really weird. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe some social scientists can figure that out for us.
Yeah, like when the state Supreme Court just announces that you can murder somebody if you're under 21 years old, and you won't do any time because your brain isn't fully formed. You can murder your heart's content.
Don't
worry, word will not get around in high schools and on the streets. No one will ever know about this decision the Supreme Court just made.
That is so egregious. That is worse than anything the judge did here, okay, in this federal case. Because there's a law in the state of Michigan that says once you are 18, there are crimes where you are eligible for life without parole. And it was the bargain that people in Michigan made over 100, almost 200 years ago to eliminate the death penalty. They said, we're not going to have the death penalty. We're going to have life without parole. Bang, forget about it. Okay. And we got rid of it. But so we were okay with that. And now here some judges walk in. There's no statutory basis for pushing that date from 18 to 20. None. That is you writing something out of whole cloth. Saying kids' brains aren't fully functional until they're 20. Really?
Maybe that should be a constitutional amendment.
That'd
be a good ballot proposal. Drop the age down to 17 too while you're at it.
This is from the same party, the same group of people that is telling us, well, we should lower the voting age to 16.
Yeah.
So your brain is fully functional enough to decide on who runs this state and this country. That's okay.
Well, your brain can be mush for that. You don't even have to be literate to vote. You don't have to know anything.
Exactly.
As long as someone can vote for you or tell you what to do to vote.
But at the same time, you don't know that killing somebody is wrong. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Totally. And
we'll be here all night if we don't move on here. But
I know my only point is this is on Republicans. Republicans fell down on the job when they did not support the two Supreme Court candidates in the last election. Yeah. They could have won. It was I point the finger a little bit at the state Republican Party because they gave those guys nothing in the way of support.
Yeah, well, I think, unfortunately, we have a long way to go to win back that court. And it's frankly going to be coming on the whole conservative movement to start talking a lot more about these rogue judges and what Democrats will do when they're put on the bench because they are demented. And I was out in Wisconsin recently. Voters do not really yet understand it, and they need to start learning, and they need to learn fast. So
that's right.
I hope this decision is talked about far and wide. But anyway. All right, let's let this continue. So this is almost over, and then we'll get to the end.
Have to be looking at the laws on that, Steve, okay?
How essential is it for you guys to be locking up these prisoners? And do you think more presidents should follow suit like you guys as far as taking a hard stance on crime here in the United States?
Well, I do. I think everybody has to. The president said it better than anybody. He said, you know, you have liberty and you have to have liberty, but to have liberty, not everybody is gonna be good. And you know, some are
So
bad.
he forgot the line because this happened earlier in the news conference, and Bukele says, you know, I like to say I put thousands of people in prison, and in doing so, I've freed millions of people. And Trump is like, wow, that's a great line. I didn't remember that one. He hasn't remembered it.
Right on his hand or something. Yeah, I butchered
Yeah,
that.
but that was a good line. And yeah, when you release criminals into society, you are basically turning society into an open air prison where we're all exposed to these inmates, these dangerous people.
Right. And once you take a guy through it once and you let him go, do you think prison is a deterrent any longer?
Yeah.
No, it isn't.
Yeah, John C. King says, I think it said more like 25 before the human brain is fully developed. Yeah, well, let's make that the voting age. Anyway, all right. Let's get
Because they're sick, they're mentally deranged, they're bad.
Why do you
Then you have to take them, if you're gonna have a country, you're gonna have to take those people out. And we've been doing that. But this was like an unforced error, they would call it, where we had people that may hate our country, or maybe they're just stupid people. I think they're probably stupid people more so.
They hate our country too. Come on, they can be both. They're stupid and they hate our country.
For the vote. But I did better with Hispanic people than they did, because they always use Hispanic. I did better. You people love me. I saw my poll numbers in your country. I'm through the roof, right? 91%. No, they some people think they do it for the vote. But they don't have to do it for the vote. They cheat, you know, they're professional cheaters. That's about the only thing they do well. So we just have had a great relationship, and it's become bigger because of a strange thing that happened. You know, I came back, we had no war in Ukraine. We had no October 7th, Middle East problem. We had nothing. We had no inflation. We didn't have the Afghanistan, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, the Afghanistan, not withdrawing, because I would have been out, you know, I had it all set to bring people out with dignity and pride. That was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our country, Afghanistan. We didn't have any of that. You wouldn't have had the war with Russia, Ukraine. You wouldn't have had the Middle East problem because Iran was broke. They had no money.
Well, he's kind of off the subject now, but that, and the whole conference is, well, it's all very good, although this is the Trump we just saw was the Trump we voted for, not the one that was talking about, yeah, and we're going to go to war and we're going to rebuild Gaza and blah, 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 but whatever. Anyway, so we've got, how do I get on the full screen on this? We've got one more hot document that that Matt was able to get for us for today. This is well, there's been so many filings in this case. This might not yet still be the newest filing, but as of a couple hours ago, this is the latest. This is today's daily update for her honor, the black robe tyrant, Judge Paula Zenas. And this is today's update from Joseph N. Mazzara, acting general counsel of the Department of Homeland Security. I provide this declaration based on my personal knowledge, reasonable inquiry, and information obtained from other DHS employees. I'm aware of the instant lawsuit been filed regarding the removal of Kilmar Abrego Garcia to El Salvador. On March 15th, Abrego Garcia, a native and citizen of El Salvador, was removed to El Salvador pursuant to Title 8 of the U.S. Code, see the declaration. During bond proceedings in 2019, an immigration judge upheld DHS's decision not to grant bond, finding that DHS's determination that he was a member of MS-13 was trustworthy and supported by other evidence, and noted that Abrego Garcia, quote, failed to present evidence to rebut that assertion. The Board of Immigration Appeals upheld the finding when Abrego Garcia appealed. See the declaration we just looked at.
And the thing about that is that directly contradicts what Sotomayor wrote in her complaint. She said he denied this and no court found this. No.
Yeah, think about this, folks. 3 justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, in other words, all 3 of the Democrats, lied in their decision.
Yeah, they said.
Well, it's not the decision, but you know the statement they attached to the decision.
Right, and they said they specifically said something to the opposite. And it's like, okay, well, I guess it's your own understanding of the facts. Okay, keep going.
Yep. Hey, John Smith says, thank you for the show. Hey, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. And everyone smash that like button if you haven't already done so. Appreciate it. And give it the share too. That really helps, even more so than liking and sharing. Comments help too. Abrego Garcia was ordered removed by an immigration judge. He was also granted withholding of removal by an immigration judge. That's the bit about going back to El Salvador. He is no longer eligible for that withholding of removal because of his membership in MS-13, which is now a designated foreign terrorist organization. DHS has established processes for taking steps to remove domestic obstacles that would otherwise prevent an alien from lawfully entering the United States. DHS does not have the authority to forcibly extract an alien from the domestic custody of a sovereign foreign nation. I'm aware that the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, was in Washington, D.C. today to meet with President Donald Trump. President Bukele, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I think it's Bukele. I don't know.
Bukele,
President Trump held a bilateral summit at the White House this morning. I understand that in response to a question regarding Abrego Garcia, President Bukele says, I hope you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? Of course, I'm not going to do it. The question is preposterous. Video of the meeting is here. And that's the end of it. I do declare under penalty of perjury the foregoing is true and correct. Buzz off, Judge. You're done.
Well, and very particularly, look, the judge said, I want to know what you're doing. Here's what we're doing. I sat with the guy.
Well,
talk with him on camera.
There will be a hearing on this tomorrow. There's another hearing scheduled for tomorrow.
And if I'm the DHS attorneys, I'd walk in and say, Judge, I have nothing more to offer you.
Yeah.
We asked. We were told no. We, in our rights as the sole person doing foreign relations, are not doing anything more. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then just end it there.
This is the most ridiculous, most egregious judicial action yet, where the judge is literally just openly defying the U.S. Supreme Court. What will it take for somebody to take action against these judges? If it's not this, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the one that's coming in that's fascinating is that there is a push, and it's Gorsuch and Thomas that want to eliminate the non-party injunction.
Yeah,
eliminate it. There, because people understand. So in the federal system, there is a very specific process for creating a class action lawsuit. Okay, you have to do certain things, and it's very complicated, very detailed, which is why a lot of the mass tort litigation that is class action is not done in the federal system. It's very difficult. But what these judges have done is say, we're going to make an exception here, Mr. Liberal Cause. We're going to say all 13,000 programs under USAID, they must continue, even though there's no standing for that. And you just created a class action out of whole cloth. And it's really ticking those two judges off, and potentially more. And what's likely for the Supreme Court to say is these in our federal system are not allowed. If you want to get together plaintiffs, 13,000 plaintiffs, and file one lawsuit, you can do that. And then they have the authority to do that. But until you do, you can't. And they won't. And all of this is all funded by the same people doing the same stuff. People need to understand that when somebody seeks asylum, they get a piece of paper from a public service organization that you probably funded. And it says, oh, you're a member, you live in Guatemala, recite the following. And the judges see the reason why these go for immigration judges, they see it all the time. They're like, you're reading off of a piece of paper. You're not at risk of death. You traveled 1,000 miles across Mexico and you were in another country. So no, get out.
The irony is those gang members that he swore he was trying to elude in El Salvador are probably right there at CCOT with him now. So anyway.
Oh, well.
Yep. All right, guys. I think that'll do it for us for tonight. You got anything else coming up, Matt? Oh, and we will be shortly publishing that video too. You did a wonderful presentation about how to hold schools accountable for the radical left-wing agenda they've got. The video came out great, by the way.
Oh, great.
Members of the Washington Republican Club will get free access to the video, and we'll be listening to copy to you as well.
Well, we do have one thing planned with your frequent co-host, Patty P., and myself, the Plymouth Canton Republicans Club, Northville Republicans Club, and Livonia Republicans Club if you live in Wayne County, especially if you live in any part of Wayne County where you had the unfortunate case to have Debbie Dingle on your ballot. You used to have the right to opt out of a transit tax. That has been taken away from you by Democrats, including the Democrats that said they represent you. So we're having a function on it. It is on May the 5th. You can go visit at Not Smart at eventbrite.com to pick up your tickets. We're going to get the answers to 2 very important questions. And then the answers are 3 and 4. And I'm going to leave it right there. The answers are 3 and 4. And there's a preview that you're going to have. It's amazing. It's got great, amazing facts. There's no chance that I can make these graphics. This is all Patty. She has this unbelievable creative thing. And that is, in fact, the bus from the movie Speed. And it's got the SEMTA logo on it, and the Democrats are driving the bus. So
and you can see the address on the screen there, notsmart.eventbrite.com.
That's right. SMART is the taxing authority. If you live in Wayne County or nearby, and actually some people from Oakland reached out because they were subject to this too. There's massive portions of Oakland County that pay into this stupid tax, and they're 15, 20 miles from a bus stop. And we'd love their help to block this here, because this one we had the right to opt out of, and the Democrats, Matt Colazar, Jason Morgan, Peter Herzberg, Raj Puri, Reggie Miller, they all voted to take away my rights. And people need to know that, because this is a new tax and we got to fight it off.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for joining me tonight. This has been fun. I don't know if we'll do another update tomorrow night. These videos do take a little bit of time out of my day, but this was a lot of fun. And, it's been a while since we've done any legal document reading on this channel. I miss it. It's great.
Anytime you want to do,
especially when there's spicy documents.
Yeah, this stuff is fascinating. And especially since they keep going up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court keeps slapping them back down, and again and again and again and again. There are some really big cases coming up. April 22nd. So that is next Tuesday, I believe. There is a big case that Michigan parents should be paying attention to. It's called Mahmoud versus Taylor. It is about parents and their rights to opt their children out of books, particularly LGBTQ content, if that content violates their closely held religious beliefs. So I'm going to be tuning into that one live. I want to hear that one. I want to hear what they have to say. If it comes out the way I think it is going to be a monumental new right for parents in Michigan and across the country.
Outstanding. Look forward to it. All right. Thanks again, guys. Until next time, thanks as always for all you do for liberty. And until then,